Okay, that was a oh. That was a really insightful conversation on PAM. I actually really enjoyed it, and I'm just going to go through some of the things that I got out of it. That it's not enough to just apply IAM and PAM. You've got to find the value in it. You've got to understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and really take a risk-based approach when it comes to it. It comes with pain points, both on both sides. Pain points that drive you to privileged access management, and of course having an identity access management strategy that include understanding that, especially with this remote working situation, that access account review processes aren't always done well. And then if you don't know what you don't know, it creates opportunities for exploits to happen. Obviously, inventory of assets. Again, if I look at the pain points of why you want to do this, if you don't have a good handle on where your assets are and who has access to what, then it's a good candidate for why you want to move to PAM. And then the pain points of moving to PAM, what does that mean? Change management, they talked about developers, but I don't think it's just developers. Anybody that is used to having a certain privilege in the organization, it's hard to take that away from people. But we have to kind of have a change management practice where they need to buy into the strategy. They need to understand that there is value to doing this and to doing it much more securely. The other one that wasn't touched upon, and I'm just going to talk from my own experience, and that is operationalizing. We tend to buy products which are really good, like in this example with privileged access management, but then who manages it? Who supports it? You have to have the right training. You have to ensure that you are implementing the right use cases, and you got to know how it works, right? So I think that is another pain point that I would definitely challenge everyone here who is thinking about privileged access management to make sure that you put it on your roadmap. And then, of course, the end of it is just risk-based authentication. There are a number of ways in which you can apply authentication to certain assets. Taking a risk-based approach is the right way. Just in time was a really good example of where you can have access by certain user bases based on their whether they're high-value targets like HR and finance and IT, and where there isn't a need for them to have access all the time. Just in time is the way to do it. So I really like that point. Okay, so moving on to the next presentation. We're going to talk about trust. Again, you're going to start to hear the word trust. It keeps coming up, which is great. So you can see there's a theme that is being threaded through all these presentations. But establishing trust around zero trust. So I'd like to welcome Tushar Singh, Andrea Knoblauch, Hank Carr, and Elena Sinelnikova to the stage. Please join me.
Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Come on, day 2 energy afternoon. We can do a little bit better. All right. Yes. See, there. I'm going to look over there. That's who I'm speaking to from now on. That was the test. It's a good afternoon. My name is Tushar Singh. I'm the CEO and founder of Minute School. You may have heard our dark web talk yesterday. Very related topic here from an organization perspective. We help organizations educate and engage their teams through continuous micro-learning. Both education and engagement go hand in hand when implementing organizational change. And that's really what this conversation is about, a big part of this conversation. Part of this can be due to modern workforces that are more willing to critically examine changes to processes, the things they've always been doing, and a major shift in strategy in the company or operational strategy. Today I'm going to dive into the topic of zero trust models with a panel of experts. We're going to start with Elena Sinelnikova, who's the CEO of CryptoChicks and CEO of Meetus. Elena, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Of course. Hello, everyone. It's glad to be here. So my name is Elena, and I am a blockchain expert. So I've been in blockchain for now about 10 years, and before I was actually working for police in terms of the building application security around them. So this topic is very familiar for me. But right now, yes, I chose blockchain because this is a very new, very cool, very democratic technology. And created organization CryptoChicks, which is in 56 countries right now. This is a female organization. And right now also I'm leading another startup that is addressing the scalability and the cost of the blockchain. So thank you.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you for joining our panel.
Thank you.
So next we have Andrea Knoblauch, who is the Principal of Security at Softchoice. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role there?
Sure, thanks for having me. My name is Andrea Knoblauch. I'm one of the principals for security at Softchoice. My role is basically to help with some of the biggest transformation projects that organizations are going through right now. So we specialize in zero trust business transformation. So meaning what we're doing is we're aligning security to drive business transformation. And we're also looking at the organizations from a holistic perspective to see how we can improve processes, technologies, and people across the entire organization versus the old world of living in silos.
And I think that's an extremely important topic. Something as a leader that I've encountered across my startups or those organizations I've joined is the silo model of control. And there is an element of control that we are going to speak about here quite a bit, especially from a philosophical perspective. And I'd like to introduce Hank Carr, Senior Solutions Engineer at Saviynt. Hey, that's you? I think that is you. Hank, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Hank Carr. I am the Senior Solutions Engineer in Canada for Saviynt. I spent 22 years in the federal government. I worked with Coast Guard and Fisheries. I spent 20 years in corrections as an employee and did some work with DND. I have been outside of the federal government since 2011, working predominantly in active threat detection, hacker hunting. So I went from guns and badges into hacker hunting, and I've ended up at Saviynt. I've been in the industry since before the internet. So I have seen the development of IT from pre-internet days, and I am here to provide historical and philosophical color to the conversation.
Thank you, Hank. And I may not look it, but I also was pre-internet, but more getting into trouble online, pre-internet, and getting into the early internet. So with that, we're going to go right into some questions here. We have a total of 15 questions to get through, so please be prepared for a little bit of a grind. So the first question is going to be, zero trust models move us beyond the trust but verify maxim. And Hank, this is, I think, a question primarily directed at you. With that in mind, can it breed dissatisfaction amongst internal staff and employees?
I think it's scary. It's a scary sounding subject. We're not going to trust you. The reality is, if you're doing it well, it should be invisible. It should make sure that you have everything that you need immediately when you need it. It should be very easy. And as I say, invisible. I need this, it's there. And it should stop you from going out of bounds, but give you the ability very quickly and very easily to get permission to do what you want to do. So if you're doing it properly, it should make the user experience better. And that's the goal of doing zero trust well.
Okay, thank you. And I think there's that modern kind of misconception that if you're doing zero trust or there's a push, it means that companies or groups have something to hide as this. The cryptocurrency world often gets painted with this brush as well. So I'm going to ask you, Hank, first, and then Elena, what are the benefits of approaching zero trust in these models and access differently?
Well, I mean, again, if you're doing it properly, it should be invisible. You should be able to access what you need to access. It should keep you out of things that you shouldn't need to access, so that you have no need to access. One of the statistics that we always quote is that 90% of identities in an organization use only 5% of the entitlements that they have. So that means that if zero trust is being done well, you're not losing things that you should have. But as an employee, it's going to protect you as well, because there is no chance that you can get out of bounds and do something that you shouldn't do, or out of bounds. And it's going to protect your information. With GDPR and Bill 64 in Quebec and the security policy in Canada in general, your information needs to be protected. And Zero Trust will protect your information just as it protects your customers' information and all of the information from your organization. So it's not about hiding secrets, it's about protecting things that need to be protected and giving you easy access to things that you need to have access to.
And that's an interesting angle of it goes two ways, right? And really does a lot of coverage. Elena, you've been working in the cryptocurrency blockchain sort of space. Can you add to that?
Yes, every time you hear, there's some negativity behind some subject, whether it's Zero Trust or cryptocurrency, you have to ask yourself who is benefiting from that, tainting of the technology. Because we are moving forward with the technology. All technology exists for the reason. Zero Trust exists for the reason because it's easy to use and it is, it's probably, faster way to get you the right access. Blockchain and cryptocurrency is the same. It is very democratic technology, and when, for example, I hear that allegations that, it's used by the dark web, it, of course, there's nothing more transparent than a blockchain because it's very open, it's very traceable. Everything that is written on a blockchain stays on a blockchain forever. So, but behind all this allegation, there is some parties that actually probably fear to lose the control and fear that the technologies actually take a power from them. So every time you hear something like that on the media, ask yourself a question, why it is. So just to maybe destroy some of the myths. So for example, blockchain, so there is the environmental impact on a blockchain, let's say. So this is kind of like last century. And this is true. Bitcoin runs on the proof of stake, which is kind of wasting electricity. But if you look at all the branches of all the banks around the world, how much electricity do they waste? So nobody is actually thinking about that. And right now, blockchains are moving to the proof of stake, which means that it's a clean energy. There's no more electricity wasting in the modern blockchains right now. So something like that along these lines. So just the education, and that's what we do at CryptoChicks. We educate people about this subject.
Right, thank you. And I'm going to jump now into implementation and getting an ROI. And so Andrea, this one is 100% directed at you. Hank, maybe we'll let you participate in this one. So Zero Trust models also have a significant life cycle, which comes with cost and implementation cycles and expertise. So how do you build a case for an ROI when you're actually looking to implement a Zero Trust?
Absolutely. I think one of the things about Zero Trust that differentiates from traditional security is that Zero Trust allows us to finally align security to business and to that business transformation. So when we have when I have a lot of conversations with clients, it's really about, we know we need this from a security perspective, from an IT perspective, but how do I convince my C-level? How do I convince the CFO that we need to do these Zero Trust things, which they take 3 to 5 years. They're not an overnight thing. They're very expensive migration projects and very expensive transformation projects. So what we do is we align it to the business. What is the business trying to solve? How is the business evolving post-pandemic for their, to stay in business? Like what is this organization trying to do to serve its customers in its marketplace? And what we do is we align security to drive that goal. So for example, a lot of organizations right now are very worried about cloud costs. This comes up quite a bit. But if we move things to the cloud and we leverage things like Zero Trust, we can actually cut down a lot of that technical waste while we're doing that, because now we can move those controls from our traditional network state to an identity-based model, align it to those cloud projects, and all of a sudden we create a business ROI, saying if you do these things from a security perspective, you are going to save the costs in buying appliances, we're going to save you costs in process, and we're going to save you costs in people, because once we start to do the automation that comes with Zero Trust, you now need less people to manage your whole environment. So all of a sudden you kick up all these amazing benefits for the business that they can put dollar figures on. For example, hey, M&A normally takes 2 to 3 years. What if we brought it down to 2 weeks? How would that actually have financial implications for your company? And now we can have a business case for that CFO to say, while you're spending all this money on these process changes and the adoption of Zero Trust, We are now going to save you all this money in your cloud costs, in your technical debt. Your CapEx will now be OpEx. So now we've helped them build that business model to get that funding.
Okay, and I think that's really interesting on a couple of different points, but I'm going to wait. Hank, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. I think I'm an old guy, and as I said, pre-internet days. I've seen internets built from the ground up. You're a mom and pop, and you get a little bit bigger. You start to do some automation, you get a little bit bigger, and what you're doing is you're building an elephant of network, and we all have done this. And Andrea and I were talking earlier today when we discovered after sitting side by side for a day that we were actually sitting side by side. How do you eat an elephant, right? That's a perennial question. When I'm talking to customers, they always say, we can't do this. We can't do what you do because our identities are out of control. Our groups are out of control. It's not clean. That's what we do, right? And so the question is, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. You do something small. You make a change. You get going. Now, as Andrea says, to go from where we are now to where we need to be is a very large lift. And people are afraid. We were talking about this earlier. I was in Halifax at Atlantic Security Conference a month ago, and I had two administrators standing in front of me who were telling me our network is out of control. We spend all our time creating accounts and giving people access to things and taking access away. Not really, we don't ever do that. We all know that. And so if we do what you're talking about, what are we going to do? Like, are we going to get fired? Are we going to lose our jobs? And the answer is no. Like, you went into computer science, you went into what you do to do cool stuff, to do exciting stuff. And is creating accounts exciting? No, it's boring as hell. Right? You don't want to deal with whiny users all the time. I want this and I want that. Right? So if you automate, if you get to the point where we're doing everything that we're talking about doing up here, the people who are creating the accounts and adding access, they get to look to the future. Where are we going? What are we doing? What's our cloud strategy going to be? How do we get there? How do we get rid of what we're doing, right? How do we get rid of our network, right? You have to get rid of your network. And Andrea will tell you that. Get rid of your network. And I went into a meeting one time. I'm going to go for a couple of minutes here. I went into a meeting one time, and there was a Canadian company that had been breached, and Andrea's already heard this question, I'm sorry, or this story, I'm sorry. So I went into this little company, and my sales guy said, I'm going to do a bunch of slides, I'm going to talk, do a bunch of introduction, and then I'm going to hand it to you. Cool. So I was going in expecting to spend 15 minutes talking. So we went in, and as we're pulling into the parking lot, he turned to me, Dan Beaudry, I love the guy. He said, I didn't do any slides. I'm just going to pitch to you. Don't say anything outrageous. So we went into this meeting with the CISO and the CIO and the managers of the network, the directors of the network, and they were stressed because the Chinese had just been dragged out of their network kicking and screaming. And we're sitting in this boardroom, and the sales guy, who has let me down with no slide deck, said to me, or he said to them, hi, I'm Dan Beaudry. I'm your sales director. This is Hank Carr. Take it away, Hank. So I looked at these people who are stressed and freaked out, and I said to them, I would like you to consider the possibility of turning off your firewall and routing your network directly to the internet. And the meeting went to hell in a handbasket. These guys, the directors were yelling at each other, the CISO was yelling at everybody, and it was a free-for-all for 15 minutes. And I finally said, come on, like, I'm not serious. All right, I'm not serious about that. It's not a serious suggestion. But the fact that you puckered when I said to you, turn off your firewall and route your network directly to the internet means your network is not secure. If the firewall is the only thing that's keeping the bad guys out, you are in serious trouble. So that's what we're talking about, is getting to the point where your firewall isn't the last line of defense. And I, for years, have been talking about taking that $1 million firewall out at the border of your network that does nothing because it's full of holes, and moving it into the core of your network in your data center, putting one server on each firewall port and having specific, system-specific and user-specific rules on every port of that firewall. and putting a Cisco ASA 5505 out at the border because it's not doing anything other than being a gatepost. So that's what we're talking about doing. How do you get to the point where there is no network anymore? And by the way, Saviynt, the company that I work for, we have no network. There's nothing for me to VPN into. We don't have servers. We don't have anything. We are 100% cloud. And it's really cool.
All right, Hank, I'm going to have to take 2 minutes away from somewhere else.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
But I want, there's a few things there that we have to unpack here. And Andrea, I want you to actually unpack this because we're talking about ROI. We're talking about selling the CFO on this, selling the members of the executive team on here. But we just heard we now also need to sell this to the team. And this transitional process that's going to take 3 to 5 years, how do you sell it to the people that are there so that they don't jump ship?
Yeah, and that's a hard thing because what we see right now is there's a lot of organizations where there's people on these different teams who they see the value of zero trust and they want to do all the zero trust things, but the management of the organization is very legacy. They still believe in the firewalls and the network. And so we see a lot of friction, we see a lot of churn as a result. So it's really important to make sure that we're not only having the conversation outside of our silos, that we can find commonality of how these projects are going to fit together to get more buy-in, but this conversation also, and I joke about this a lot, is it shifts us left and it shifts us up because now we're becoming a business conversation and it really is something that cannot exist in a single silo. Zero Trust covers 8 domains, all the way from your infrastructure and your identity to data and applications and things like that. So the more you work together and you're able to see how those threads connect across the whole business, it allows you to really collapse a lot of the technology spend, a lot of the process, and helps you actually be able to almost start from scratch. And here's the way it should have been set up from the beginning that we never could do because we've had this 25 years of legacy, process and technology that we've been contending with. So it really does get people on board, and I see it where an organization will go through this zero trust transformation and someone will leave because I just want to do this over and over, and they'll go to another company and then we'll see them there because they're like, we want to do this now here. And so that mind share really does spread, and all of a sudden you start to see this split in the industry where we joke it's the thing you can't unsee. Once you see the zero trust and the identity way, you almost don't want to do the network way anymore. And so it creates this secondary industry within security where we're moving towards these things, and you become really passionate. I joke I'm probably the most passionate person about zero trust because I get to clue in all these organizations every day about how cool it is once we start to get to the automation, we set up single profiles and things like this, things we could never ever do before in order to speed up business transformation, actually make the whole thing easier to manage as a whole, which means no more burnout.
All right, now, thank you for that. And I think you touched on a couple points. One key one is life is short, have fun.
Yeah.
I think that's what I took from that at least. But the second piece is something that is fun, which is process and process optimization. So let's talk about that. How do you recommend verifying the efficacy of a zero trust model? Mm-hmm. And then do you go system-wide or do you go process by process? How does that work?
It's both. So you can look at zero trust from an optimization level across the organization. So you can see, for example, think of HR. You get a new employee on board. How many systems do they have to set them up, into? And then, for example, if that employee leaves, how many systems do you have to decommission them to? So if I come in and I say, hey, I can create this global identity, when they onboard, all of a sudden they have access to just the systems they need to and the applications they need to, and then it's a one-click to take them out of the systems as well. Well, now you're helping out HR, you're helping out all the IT processes, you're helping out help desk and service desk and all these different areas. So all of a sudden, there's more excitement to do these things. But the metrics may, for example, specifically live in IT, so it kind of balances both.
You're all good. Please continue.
Oh.
Yep.
There we go. But yeah, so it's very important to see how those metrics translate to the overall business because, again, zero trust really drives business transformation and it drives a lot of efficiencies around technology, processes, and people, especially now when you think about how many people we need to hire in security, and there's not a lot of folks available. So it helps you do more with less. But it has great measurements, not just, again, from the typical security, like, hey, we're reducing our CapEx, moving it to OpEx, but we also have that ability to now to show, hey, my M&As take shorter time, so there's a business cost that I'm getting back. So now you've got these great metrics on both sides, and they do need to be measured across the company as a whole, but also in those silos to show the efficacy of, hey, we're doing these things, but we actually have these tangible results now.
And I think that really ties back into the ROI conversation you had before and continue to go through. Hank, did you have anything on that?
I just wanted to add that one of the things that Zero Trust does, if it's implemented well, is that it pushes out responsibility that should not be with IT into the business. And that's one of the things that we do, where in a network setting, IT is often creating accounts and adding people into endpoints and setting things up, where when you have Zero Trust set up well and you have the right tools in place, HR triggers the process of getting people onboarded and accounts created and entitlements assigned. And the business creates the rules and the processes around it so that IT isn't involved. And what that does is it gets the ability to run the business into the hands of the business, so they don't need to count on IT. IT then gets to look to the future, how they're going to improve things going forward. What are we going to migrate to? What are we looking to do as projects? And let the business people run the business, right? So it brings that to the table as well, which I think is really important.
Yeah, and I concur. We have projects that we've worked on where it's typically like, well, how do you do this? Well, we're going to let the IT team deal with it, when as part of the process or your requirements to operate in that space, the responsibility needs to lie with the executive team to onboard, especially for key areas. Otherwise, your access is given to anyone on that other team, right? And you can have, well, it's another security risk, and you shouldn't trust that team for the senior levels and senior level decisions that are being made. So I'm going to jump a little bit now to the implementation and some implementation methodologies. And Elena, I'm going to actually ask you this one. So blockchain is not the only way to establish Zero Trust, but it is one of the actual ways. It's an established method as well. I've had plenty of conversations here, as I hope you have as well, on different models that are coming up on identity verification and many elements like that. So how can organizations get started with blockchain?
Thank you for this question. Yes, so first of all, I would like to touch why blockchain. So of course, depends on which blockchain, but I am a fan of the public blockchains. And public blockchain is always available. There's no, like, it's a 0%, zero downtime. It's decentralized, so there is not sitting on somebody else, like somebody's service. It's actually across the world on the people's computers all over the world, and there's no central party that controls it. So it means that nobody can, turn it off, or there's no hacker that can take it down. Unless the whole internet and the whole world is down, I mean, which we have a bigger problem.
Bigger problems.
We have a bigger problem in this case, right? So yes, so it cannot be done. So this is point number one. So always available. Second, it's immutable. So once it's written on blockchain, it always stays on the blockchain. No one can change it. So I run like many educational sessions. So for example, to hack into Bitcoin algorithm of the security algorithm or encryption algorithm that will allow you actually to change the record, hacker needs to leave more than our universe. So that's how strong the algorithm is of the encryption in there. So, and it's true for all the blockchains. So it's not hackable. There's no modern technology exists that can hack the technology. So therefore, everything that you write on, it stays on. No one can change. It's like any whitelist, any identity context you put in there. Pretty much anything, it is there. It's always available for you, and no hacker can actually get into it. So it's a huge, huge advantage of using a blockchain in that in a zero trust models. And third thing is it's borderless. It's across the world. So I worked for Edmonton Police, and for some support cases, we did need to come on site because of this, stupid firewall thing. Because yes, we have to be there. So I could not go to, I was one of the support persons. I could not go to the pool without my phone or anything like that, like to the movies or anything. I have to be available all the time, and then I have to come in physically there. So the whole life was basically put on hold at that time when I was on the support calls. In this case, in the zero trust and the blockchain combination, you can be anywhere in the world actually. So that's the huge, huge advantage that blockchain brings. how to start with it. And that is a difficult question, because when I was getting ready for this panel, I started reading different papers and research papers, and all of them that I found, they have completely old, outdated information about the blockchains. So the blockchain, that is, even if you go to the internet, you start Googling, it is not as it is written in right now. It is moved light years ahead now. So the thing that you have to do is just to educate yourself more about the subject. So what we do at CryptoChicks, and that's why I'm here, we provide this education, and it's not self-advertisement, even though it sounds it is. We are a non-profit organization. We do it basically at a cost, right? So it's not, there's no profit for us for that. So we do it as a volunteer, a non-profit organization. We do educate people. Website CryptoChicks.ca. You can touch base with me directly, so there's not a lot of, I can handle, if you can connect on me on LinkedIn, I can answer your questions personally, because I'm on a mission. I love this technology. I think it's going to go forward, very, very soon. It's going to be mainstream, and I would like to help, zero trust and security model, cybersecurity in that. So this is something that I will take very personally. So please contact me. And as well, I have right now, I'm leading one of the startups, and we're going to be at the Collision Conference, and we are addressing the most important, scalability problem, as I said, because public blockchains have a scalability problem. Then data permissions, the permissions problem, we address that one as well. The cost, we address that one as well. So technology is moving forward, and I can help.
And that's good to know, and especially in this space, in the blockchain space, there's a lot of examination to do. It has to be paired with the ROI element. It has to be paired with what your organization is trying to achieve, the human element as well. So, Hank, I'm going to ask you this one. You're back off on the clock now. So, what unique indicators of compromise can zero trust models give you that traditional authentication protocols may not?
Well, in the way that we do it, we provide only the access that you need, only when you need it. And we tie into other sources of risk information, like UEBAs and firewalls and things of that type. So we are able to take the regular access that you have and compare that to what you're doing. With our AI, we monitor everything that users are doing. So if you request access to a firewall, for example, to change or to look at logs, and you're logged in looking at logs and you go off and try to make a change to a configuration, we will stop you because we know what you're doing. Because we've given you that entitlement, we know what you're supposed to be doing with it. As soon as you step out of that entitlement, we're able to detect that. So because we know what you're allowed to do at a very fine-grained level, stepping out of that is an indication that there's something wrong.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to go into this second to last question. Oh, actually, no. We've only done 7. We've got 15 more to go, or 7 more to go. Okay, so are you concerned that, Hank, as well, that zero trust models can seem punitive? And how are best practices to better advance through, to be better advanced through the organization with zero trust models? And then after that, Andrea, I'm going to have to ask you to answer that.
It seems punitive to people who are concerned about losing entitlement. And really what happens often is as you move around an organization, entitlement is added, but it's never removed. So if you're a payables clerk and you become a receivables clerk, you gain the receivables functions, but you don't lose the payables functions. And so implementing zero trust, as I said earlier, 90% of identities use 5% of their entitlements. So you're going to people and saying, as we implement zero trust, you're going to lose 95% of your entitlements. And people go, holy shit, how am I going to do my job? The reality is you're not using those entitlements. And so you have to approach this as with any major thing that you do in IT. You have to socialize it. You have to explain it. You have to calm nerves, right? The idea of zero trust is to give you what you need. It's not to take things away from you. It's to make sure that you have everything that you need immediately when you need it with zero friction. So part of it, and the other thing is what the two administrators that I was talking to in Halifax, who said, what am I going to do once this is all done? So it's really about selling it in and calming nerves and assuring people that it's going to be good. And I live in this world, and it's awesome because there's zero friction for me to access anything that I need. And because we don't have a network, I don't have to fight with internal IT, which I have a history of doing. So it really is very good for everyone in the organization. It's great for the organization, but it really is very good for you as someone in the organization. It's up to us and leaders to convince you or to reassure you that it's not punitive, that you're not going to lose anything, that you're going to be able to do your job. So I think it can, but it's up to us to convince them that it isn't.
Thank you. Andrea?
Yeah, and I just say that comes back to the whole process. If you build the process in silos, and then all of a sudden you take away access for folks, yeah, they're absolutely going to scream and say, "What? You know, I can't do these things anymore." But if you build the processes with the whole business in mind, you should have all the right access controls in place to say, you have everything you need to do your job. What we've done is taken the risk out of everything else by giving you, the traditional ways, we just give you access to the network and you can see all the applications, even if you don't have access to them. Well, that's a horrible idea for security because if I can see the applications, I can ping them and I can cause, huge damage to those. So we're just taking away things that they shouldn't even know exist and just giving them explicit access to things that they do interact with. So again, if we build those processes right and make sure that we know exactly which users group need access to what, there shouldn't be any downside for them to adopt this type of process because they've already invested in that business conversation to say, this is why we're doing it, and this is the advantage to you. Hey, you don't have this huge app page anymore with things you're like, what is this? And you're actually speeding up your user experience because now I'm just giving you direct application access to the things that you do on a daily basis instead of VPNing you back to the office where we just have to put you on this network because that's where the things live. So we actually can get a lot of benefits out of it that the user's like, this is actually way better than before. So they're not going to look at it as you've taken away my ability to do these things. It's like, no, you've actually now enabled me to do my job better because I've got the right tools at the right speeds, in the right look, and I can work from anywhere.
That was an interesting point is I said at the beginning, we don't have a network. When I joined Saviynt and started to get set up, I said, cool, you're going to set me up with VPN? And they said, we don't have VPN, we don't have a network. I said, we don't have a network? And they said, no. I said, cool. And we have nothing to VPN into because there's no network. So that's something else that you don't have to manage. And my endpoint would be that security should be incredibly strong and completely invisible. You shouldn't even know it's there.
It should be an enabler.
Yes, absolutely.
So, sorry, I interrupted you there. Okay, thank you. So I think the takeaway for me from that segment as well is like the simplicity is important. We don't recognize that because we have access to so much and it grows over time as well. And bringing it back and scaling it and having some transition period as well. I think that's important. But the key is humanizing it, right? Like we can't just look at this and say, you get what you get. Right? You have to go through a process of communication. And this goes through some of the other talks that were also here. We talked about the great transition, the great move. And that comes through feeling a part of the team and included in the decision-making of the process, or at least informed so that it isn't sudden. And that is important for all of us because at a human level, there is comfort in stability, at least some baseline, and knowing that the best interests are there in heart, but it's communicated. And it's not blind trust in management, but an understanding that this is something that for the organization as a whole will protect everyone, both the customers as well as you. So I thank you all for that, but I do want to take the remaining 15 seconds plus 5 minutes, team, I need 5, to give you one last chance and ask you, why is it what you do? And we're going to go Elena, Hank, and then Andrea in this. So Elena, why is it you do what you do?
Obviously, because I love it and I believe in it, and because I see there's a lot of maybe the lack of education around the subject that I so passionate about, which is blockchain. And there is like, it is also, you know, different as like blockchain and crypto, and there's a different ones, right? So there's, crypto is like kind of like tainted and very kind of, people cautious around that. Blockchain is the technology that it's all based on, right? So and this is what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about technology. I'm passionate about educating people about it. I see that there is a lot of need in it. And it's actually concerned like everyone, like even the top people in the organizations that I work with, the like big organizations, huge organizations, they don't know. They are uneducated actually by pretending to be educated and actually hurting lots like in their organizations and also people around them. So that's why I am on the mission, as I said, of educating people.
Thank you. Hank?
I mean, it pays the bills, right, if we're being honest. And I'm coin operated, I'm a sales engineer, so I get paid when we sell. I come out of network. I come out of administration. I was a LAN manager, I was a WAN manager. I understand the fear, I understand the concern, I understand the fear that organizations have of hackers. I spent 10 years hunting hackers. And I love helping people through the philosophy. I mean, I'm not an expert in zero trust. I'm not an expert in blockchain. I'm here talking about philosophy. I'm an old guy. And I like helping people to understand. I like working through fear. I like overcoming resistance by humanizing the problem. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm approachable. Come and see me. Link with me on LinkedIn. Contact me. You know, I'm an artisan maple syrup maker. I'm a small farmer. I'm a hockey dad. I'm really human, and we all are. So come and talk to us. We're cool.
Right. Andrea?
I'm just mad you didn't bring me maple syrup, but
Next time, I promise.
for me, it's honestly, I came into security late. I went to school for marketing. I fumbled into security by fluke because I worked at an MSP who needed a marketing person who could explain what they did. And for me, I just love the fact that the security industry is so wide, you don't have to come from the network world. Mm-hmm. You don't have to come from those traditional, like I can't configure a net new network environment in a data center. I've wired a SOC, but that's about it. But I came in much later, and I came in for cloud security when cloud security wasn't a thing. It was like a glimmer in the CSA, Cloud Security Alliance's eyes, and we had just come out with a new cert for cloud. I was one of the first people to write that certification because I'm like, this is going to be a thing, and if I stay in this area, I'm going to differentiate myself from everybody else. And so I was able to build a niche, just like a lot of the amazing people I work with, where they just come at security from a different angle. I love it from a business conversation. I have a lot of business conversations around zero trust. I've got smart folks that I work with who do all the technical stuff around zero trust. But most of the time we're having business conversations because now the organizations we speak with, the people in the senior levels, they don't know even, they come from that network world as well. So they're looking for advice on how do we treat zero trust as a business thing versus our traditional, let's just approach it from throwing, solutions at problems.
Thank you very much. And if I can wrap up now, thank you to all the members of this panel. Thank you for everyone for joining. I'm going to say one thing. When I had a conversation with them earlier, each one of them said, I hope people come and talk to me afterwards. And that's really important because this is a deep subject area. We've just touched on organizational elements, but each one of you is in a different place in your career. You may be looking at implementing this, but this is a topic you need to know, especially with how technology is advancing, how organizations are advancing, and how much data is being produced day to day, and how the complexity of organizations are changing. You owe it to yourself to go and talk to people at this conference. There's not that many hours left. I encourage you to speak with every single person here, connect for the remaining time, because you being silent and not asking the questions is not going to move your status quo, it's going to support it. So please go and speak and connect, and thank you once again for joining us for this panel.
Thank you.